Hi, I'm Vince Kokich, and I'm the current Editor-in-Chief of the American Journal of Orthodontics and Dentofacial Orthopedics. I'd like to welcome you to this video archive that archives the history of our journal. Did you know that the journal started in 1915? Our first editor was Dr. Martin Dewey. He was editor from 1950 to 1931. The second editor was H.C. Pollock. He was editor for quite a few years, from 1931 to 1968. Then came Dr. Todd Duell. Dr. Duell was editor from 1968 to 1978. And we have the great fortune today to have with us the fourth editor of the American Journal of Orthodontics, which it was named at that time. I'd like to welcome Dr. Wayne Watson, who was editor from 1978 to 1986.
Hi, I'm Wayne Watson. I was the fourth editor of the journal, and it's certainly a privilege to be here and talk about the journal and its progression during my tenure as editor.
Wayne, it's great to be here with you. I feel like I'm with history and living history, and we want our readers and our subscribers and members of the AAO to hear what it was all about when you were editor of the journal. So I have a list of questions. First of all, what were your qualifications that allowed you to be chosen as editor-in-chief?
When I graduated from UCSF in 1963, I felt that the situation was that the half-life of knowledge at that time was about 5 years, and so I immediately started taking postgraduate courses. Then I went on to Charles Burstone in the segmented arch techniques, and then Robert Ricketts, and after that Dan Hazelnuss, Chuck McNeil in orthognathic surgery, and so I took a plethora of postgraduate educational courses. Eugene West, my mentor and confidant, was chairman of the Division of Orthodontics at the University of California in San Francisco. My friend Lawrence Andrews created the straight wire appliance and the concept of 6 keys to occlusion. I became editor of the Pacific Coast Society, and I was editor-in-chief for about 5 years after serving as the Southern Component editor. So I guess the board felt comfortable with my background, and so they nominated me for editorship.
Now, I know when you became editor, you inherited the journal from Todd Duell, and he was a beloved person in the AAO. How long was the transition, or what kind of transition and relationship did you have with Todd?
Todd was a great man. He was a gentleman. He was extremely helpful in the transition period. But it was interesting because he brought me 1 box of manuscripts plus all of the written material and guidelines for the editorship. So I was a little bit surprised and actually concerned that there would be enough material to keep the journal moving, because we were only receiving about 8 manuscripts per month. But I just felt that if I did some important reading as far as the new literature in journal editing, that I could come up with some ideas that would help out. So the transition period was actually quick because I had some experience, and like I said, Dr. Duell was very helpful. When I had questions, I could call him. I actually went back to Illinois and spent some time with him, and met his assistant, and of course I was quite fortunate in immediately obtaining a editor's assistant, Penny Wilkes, who was just a marvelous person, and she was computer savvy and also degreed in English and anthropology, so she was a major help to me in organizing the journal.
I know you had some concerns about numbers of manuscripts were being submitted. What were some of your other concerns about the journal that you thought needed to be corrected or dealt with at that time?
I felt like I wanted to push the trend of the journal from art towards science even more so. So I did some research, and there was a group of editors that would meet in Vancouver and discuss how they would actually design the journal. And what they came up with was the use of what they call the IMRAD design. It was important because it eliminated a lot of unnecessary work and made it easier for the reader to glean out the main essence of each manuscript. So when you use IMRAD, which is the I for introduction, why did you start the experiment, and M for methods and materials and subjects, how did you manage that, what did you set up in experimental form, and then R for results, what did you find out, and then after that your discussion on how does it make a difference, what does it matter, and of course that part was essential in describing the work that had been done in the past and making comparisons. So with that, I thought it was important to make some of these changes in the journal, making it mandatory to have this IMRAD format, and also to include an abstract with each manuscript, 250 words or less, that more or less followed the IMRAD description. And then also 5 key words. And I also established a cadre of consultants so that I could send out for reviews. And so that's what I did. I sent out each manuscript to 2 different consultants, and so the cadre of consultants immediately grew to 50, so I had a lot of great help. Most of them were from the United States, but over time this grew to more of the international flavor. But they were, of course, of great help to me. And C.B. Mosby had Phyllis Rogers, the copy editor, that did the final setup for the articles. So the main thing that the editor's responsibility is that of making information flow with clarity between the author and the reader. And so that was my job. That's what I felt I had to do that.
There was a lot of work you're talking about in doing what you were doing, in sending things out and gathering the consultants. Did you have help locally? Did you have a managing editor?
Didn't really have a managing editor. Had editor of reviews and abstracts, and had a business editor with Earl Shepard, who took care of the advertising and things of that nature, which was extremely helpful. Jack Salzman was the editor of reviews and abstracts, and he was a marvelous man. And of course, Penny Wilkes was major in communicating with authors and organizing the office itself.
During your tenure as the editor, for example, now we receive annually over 900 submissions a year. Of course, it's being done electronically, so it's easy for people to send manuscripts in. From 1978 to 1986, what was the progression in numbers of submissions received from the beginning of your editorship to towards the end?
Yes, in the beginning, we received about 8 per month. So often we had to send the reviews out several times because our acceptance rate had to be in the 65% range in order to fill the journal pages. So actually the authors were quite good about accepting the consultant reviews more than once in order to finalize and make a work as valid as possible and as clear as possible. With time, so we're talking maybe 100 for the year, and over the time, why it doubled by the time I finished out. So we did have a nice increase, particularly from international authors.
What was the biggest change you saw in manuscripts from 78 to 86 when you passed the journal on?
The main thing I noticed was that we were going from a banding technique towards a bonding technique, and also that changed the materials that we were handling because there were various upgrades in the ability to bond the brackets directly to the teeth, and of course that brought on some changes as far as if you had a patient whose oral hygiene wasn't up to standard, decalcified areas changed, and so there were different methods of handling that also that we had to be quite aware of. Also, articulators were used quite often in different types of registration of the occlusion, and with that, of course, a deeper study of the temporomandibular joint, and as to avoiding dual bite and certain pathological situations and just differences in anatomy. And also the onslaught of computers so that offices could be better organized, and running of staff and patient organization. Besides that, there was huge development in appliance design, from straight wire to conventional edgewise to Frankels, and so they all had their variations in mode of operandi, but and the people enjoyed the new developments. Of course, some of the research that was being done wasn't cognizant of randomization as a method, and also double blinding, but that was coming into vogue, and we were pressing that. I brought out some of this in my editorials wherever I could. Charles Burstone was quite effective at that time in his use of the new wires that were coming out, the nitinol, beta titanium wires. The memory wires were quite influential and made people change their mode as far as treatment timing and method.
I know that you wanted to change the cover, and you made some changes in the cover. What spurred you to do that, and what was the response from the membership?
I wanted to make some changes because I felt it would be good if we had something that kind of spiced up the cover as far as what was inside the journal. So I transferred the editorial staff and also the constituent society editors to the inside of the journal. And on the outside, I gave a table of contents and also put in an illustration of one of the articles inside. And this was very well accepted because it, just that illustration on the cover gave a certain glow to it and interest. Back in January of 1980, I decided to incorporate on the cover a Journal of Dentofacial Orthopedics underneath AJO. And so from there on, that was always on the cover of our journal. And I think it spoke to the broad expanse of our reach in orthodontics as far as what we were capable of doing for our patients. And then in January of 1982, I decided to change the cover a little more. So it went from the 7/10 trim size to the 8¼ by 11-inch trim size. And the beauty of that was that we could go to a 2-column format inside, and which makes it much easier to place your illustrations and photographs and tables so that they do match up with the page that they're mentioned on. I received a lot of great comments on that.
Let me thank you for that. I didn't realize you were the one that did that.
So that really helped out. But I did get some feedback from some members that they didn't like the change in size because they had to change their bookshelves.
I found as the editor it's always a balancing act between having enough clinical material to satisfy the clinicians, but enough scientific material to give the journal its stature. Did you feel that same thing? And did you have any ways of balancing that specifically?
It was difficult to balance, and of course we were always clawing the field for new articles, clinical articles. It was difficult to find a good clinical article without it having a lot of author influence as far as subjective rather than objective attitude. But we encouraged authors to write clinical type of articles, but it was difficult to obtain ones that were considered truly scientific, because you know, the clinician wants to know how and the scientist wants to know why, and so there's a certain
Wayne, you were known for writing some very good editorials, and you know, I have that job now and always searching for ideas. Did you have any tricks for developing ideas for editorials, number one? And number two, did you have a favorite editorial that you wrote over that time?
In the beginning, I went ahead and started to explain the process of the anatomy of a manuscript and sifting through truth in order to find out what was going on with the journal. I did have favorites as far as the journal was concerned, because I felt that it was necessary to give a certain transparency to the journal so that the readers knew the work that was involved in coming up with not just a readable, but something that was accurate and free of as much bias as possible. And as you know, you can't get rid of all bias, but if if you can minimize it, then you have something that's truly scientific. And we're looking for, in articles, we're looking for repeats and patterns. And if we know these repeats and patterns, they give us the possibility of finding out whether it works in the clinic as far as reliability is concerned.
I personally have tried to divorce myself from writing politically inflammatory editorials. Did you, and I want to know, when you were a member of the Board of Trustees, did they do a complete hands-off policy with you? You're the editor, we're not going to interfere. And did you ever become sort of enticed to write an editorial about the politics of work?
They more or less gave me free rein, which was, I respected that, and so I did kind of watch a little bit, but there was a lot of correspondence between the board and the editorial office, and but we ironed things out. Good communication always helps, and as I mentioned, Penny Wilkes was terrific at that.
Yeah.
So she calmed a lot of the smoke that was coming out of the phone.
That's good. That's good. We do get letters to the editor, and which is nice to receive, because you know somebody's reading the journal. Did you get many letters to the editor while you were editor, and how did you initiate the author's response and things like that?
We obtained quite a few letters to the editor, and I also opened the door to guest editorials, which I felt was important to get some outside reflection of the readers. When I did receive letters to the editor, I did also publish the rebuttals to the particular letter, and those were well accepted and stimulating to the readers, and I even received more because of that. It almost took on the aspect that you find with the Anglo-orthodontist and the discussions that are involved there. So that was very beneficial, and of course gave me new ideas for more editorials.
I remember some controversial issues that were bouncing back and forth between author and letter writer, so you did create some controversy.
I did, particularly when it came to TMJ analysis. There was a lot of time where people were promoting the idea of chasing the disc without any real foundation being established. And of course I wrote to that theme, and it did create some additional writings that poured in through the slow mail.
Wayne, you had the opportunity to attend our recent editorial board meeting, and I really appreciated your comments at the end, reflecting back on how the journal was when you passed it on. Now that you've seen where the journal is today, what do you look at in the future as the responsibility of the journal to our membership?
With Elsevier now, it's important to electronically record everything. And so consequently, I had the feeling that maybe you could still paper publish some aspects of the journal, as far as abstracts and letters to the editor and point and counterpoint, and many of the great things that you have instituted with the journal. That way it could be a smaller paper-sized journal, as far as not trim size but thickness, and people could actually carry that around and read that at their leisure. But you know, when you think about the iPhone now, and the fact that you can just pop these things out and that everything is archived now, and I think there's just going to be more of a trend away from paper publishing.
The people that probably read the print journal the most are probably the clinicians. So, as you said, perhaps keeping some of those articles like Point Counterpoint and some of the clinically related articles in print, but going with online publishing of the more scientific might be a way to go and keep everybody happy, the scientists and the practitioners in the future.
There's something about still receiving a printed matter. They're just having it in your hands, on the desk. It pumps up your mind. Whereas if you have to go to your computer all the time in order to get the resource of an article, it's with the complexity of life now, family life, professional life, sometimes there's the tendency to maybe slide on that a little bit.
Yeah, we all know how easy that can happen. Well, Wayne, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to spend this time with me and with our viewers who will see this video. This will be archived on the AJODO website in perpetuity. So I feel honored being with you. The 4th editor of the journal. I'm now the 7th. The information you've given us shows me that you made some monumental changes in the journal, which made it much better for me when I inherited it and the editors that followed you. So we can't thank you enough.
I'm honored to have served the AAO and our members, and I certainly respect you.
And I'd like to thank all of you for sitting in on this video interview. I hope you feel the emotion that I'm feeling right now about being in the presence of this gentleman. And I hope you tell others that you know who perhaps would enjoy seeing this video. Thank you.